Russia invaded Ukraine from three sides, the largest attack on a European country since World War II. The pretext for the invasion was to protect the populations of the so-called Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics, which only Russia recognized. In reality, it was a continuation of Russian imperial policy with a passive, sleepwalking West. I have decided to carry out a special military operation. It is aimed at protecting the population that has been persecuted for 8 years by the Kiev regime. After the initial territorial gains, the Ukrainian people, with great effort, managed to repel the enemy and, above all, close the way to Kiev. We are already distributing weapons and will distribute them in the defense of our country to anyone who is willing and able to defend our sovereignty. The future of Ukraine depends on each citizen. The entire free world condemned the Russian aggression against the independent state. The wider West, led by the United States, has introduced sanctions against the Russian regime and multi-level aid to Ukraine, both military and humanitarian.
The Russian military has begun a brutal assault on the people of Ukraine. Without provocation, without justification, without necessity, this is a premeditated attack.
Poland and the Polish people have always been at the forefront of this assistance. Millions of our eastern neighbors fleeing the war found refuge in our country. 3 weeks after Russia launched its barbaric invasion, Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki and Deputy Prime Minister Jarosław Kaczyński were among the first to arrive in Kiev in March of 2022. Our Ukrainian neighbors, our friends, now need not only moral support, but also very concrete support. Ukraine today stands for fundamental European values. First of all, we all want to help Ukraine, and we know how important its struggle is, because it is a struggle for all of us. It is a struggle for civilization. The symbols of Russian barbarism will forever be Bucha and Irpin. In the liberated areas, in addition to mass graves, bound bodies were found with traces of execution. These are war crimes and will be recognized by the world as a genocide. People were killed, tortured, their limbs were cut off, women were raped, and children were murdered. What is this, if not genocide? The heroic defense of Mariupol will go down in the history of armed conflicts. Russian forces bombarded the port city with all available means for almost 2 months, turning Mariupol into a pile of rubble. As a result of an aerial bomb that hit the theater building there, about 300 people who had taken refuge there were killed. Together with hundreds of soldiers of the Azov regiment in the Russian siege, without food, water, and in terrible sanitary conditions, almost 2,000 civilians survived. In addition to relentless attacks on the more than 1,000-kilometer-long front, the Russians are launching missiles from launchers, aircrafts, and ships, as well as thousands of combat drones on Ukrainian cities and towns. We are used to drone attacks because they fly every night, but when there are rocket attacks, we seek shelter. During the invasion, the Russians abducted nearly 20,000 Ukrainian children. The International Criminal Court has declared this a war crime and grounds for persecution. The International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant for President Vladimir Putin and Maria Lviv-Belova for war crimes related to the illegal deportation of children from the occupied territories of Ukraine into Russia. As in 2022 and 2023, also this year, the Russians intensify attacks on energy and heating infrastructure in late fall. Tonight, more than 100 combat drones flew towards Ukraine. Most of them were shot down, but this time, in addition to infrastructure facilities, civilians were also affected. Just today, 1,000 days after the invasion began, Ukraine attacked Russian territory with ATACMS missiles for the first time. The attack on an arms depot near Bryansk was made possible by the approval of outgoing US President Joe Biden, which President Zelensky has sought at every opportunity since the invasion began. We are planning real actions to stabilize the front line, the necessary operations of the armed forces in the temporarily occupied territories, as well as in Russia, targeting military infrastructure. Next year, Ukraine will produce at least 30,000 long-range drones and at least 3,000 cruise missiles. A number of scenarios for ending the devastating war, in which thousands of civilians have been killed in addition to hundreds of thousands of soldiers, have recently been floated in the international space. According to Polish President Andrzej Duda, Russia, which started the war, cannot emerge victorious.
Ten rosyjski imperializm po prostu jest...
This Russian imperialism is greedy and unstoppable in the sense that if it is not, as I said, decisively defeated and quashed, it will want to seize more and more territory.
Będzie chciał zagarniać coraz to nowe terytoria.
Much will depend on the new US president, Donald Trump, who has promised to end the war as soon as he takes office. Whenever that happens, President Zelensky, in a speech 100 days after the Russian invasion, once again assured that Ukraine would never give up claims to its territories.